Welcome to Windows on the World. We've talked about regeneration, the re-engineering of London, but how is this affecting the rest of the country? There's been massive building programs going on for several years, and we're going to talk about that today, how it's affecting infrastructure and what this means to people all over the UK. Now, this is from 2014. I've been looking at a few newspaper articles just before a lot of this regeneration and out-of-town building started. This is from a newspaper article from 2014. Britain's villages are under attack from predatory developers exploiting relaxed planning laws, the Countryside Bible is warning. Country Life magazine says rural communities are being ruined by house builders. Let off the leash by David Cameron. It is now escalating everywhere. As a result, large estates are being built on the outskirts of villages, leaving residents with overcrowded schools and oversubscribed GPs. Now, those who try to defend themselves from this rather ugly and ill-conceived housing, which doesn't really fit into local areas, are being described as NIMBYs. So there's a lot of political correctness involved in the rhetoric here as well. Now, locals claim that the Hertfordshire village of Buntingford has become a dumping ground for Londoners who've been priced out of the capital. And planning permission for 1,000 houses has already been granted. Residents say there's already insufficient infrastructure to support such rapid expansion. Schools and doctors' surgeries are overflowing. And Toby Archer, chairman of Buntingford Chamber of Commerce, said, "We're just being shafted by the local council. A district plan should have been in place. This is just carte blanche for developers. We were told to expect 500 houses. Now we're getting 1,500. And this is the story that seems to be happening all over the country now. Remember, this is going back to 2014. Now, this also goes into the National Planning Policy Framework, which the government introduced 2 years ago to boost development by cutting red tape. The guideline says councils must adopt a presumption in favour of planning permission. Now, Buntingford in Hertfordshire and Letwardine in Herefordshire and Castlecary in Somerset are among many communities whose character is most at risk from developers. Thinking about this now, there'll be several more, and probably you will be able to identify some of these places around your local area if you live just outside a large town or indeed in the countryside. Now, this is just a snapshot of what's going on all over the place. So it's not just happening in and outside large cities, it's badly affecting rural areas. So I'm with Martin Houston, who's a resident of Bedfordshire and has decided to move out of London. Martin, welcome to Windows on the World.
Hi, Mark. The situation is we moved into a small village called Arlesey in the south of Bedfordshire just over a year ago now. And but just a couple of months after moving in, we found from the local paper that the farmer's field at the bottom of our garden, they were planning to build about 1,000 houses on. And another 500 or so houses and a couple of other lovely fields either side of the beautiful thatched pub in Arlesey called the White Horse, which of course would completely destroy its character and all that. So we are very surprised about this. I've tried all sorts of ways to persuade the council that what they're doing is stupid. Yes, I know, as you said from the newspaper article, you think in the first instance it's just NIMBYism. It's bully for you, you've lost your view.
Well, they come up with things that, it's verging on, so you're a racist, are you? Are you xenophobic? You know, they always attack you with a counter argument which has nothing to do with what you're actually talking about. Yeah.
But the situation is that we found out that it's not just us, it's not just our village. There was a plan that's been sort of being kicked around for about 10 years called Arlesey Cross. There's a website of the same name with all the information on it for our little local bit of this madness. But the next village to us, Henlow, the RAF are selling their airfield there, and there's going to be thousands of houses there. Yeah. The town of Baldock, which is in the other direction, in the direction of Buntingford, as you mentioned, is going to have about 3,500 houses. Letchworth is going to have more houses. Hitchin is going to have more houses. So basically, all the area around us, North Hertfordshire and South Bedfordshire, seems to be just having enormous amount of house building. We've been told. I went to a big council meeting in a sports hall in North Hertfordshire about the various developments around there in all the little villages, and all the communities from tiny little villages the local towns are basically being told they have to double in size by about 2030.
And there's been no real planning for the infrastructure. has there?
Absolutely not. No, it's not just a matter. It's not just a matter of schools, because they're building schools, they're building doctor surgeries, they're building shops. Arlesey is a bit of a strange place. It's just one long street, really, and it's going to get a supermarket as part of this development. So,
But as far as roads go, this doesn't seem to have been taken into consideration. This is what we're seeing.
Yeah,
It's almost
no.
like they can't tell everyone to stop driving, but they're trying to force people off the roads. But within rural areas, this isn't going to work, is it?
No, and the situation is where I live. I just did a sort of a straw poll of the number of cars parked outside people's houses, and certainly in the roads around me, the average number of cars parked outside a house is 3. So if they build these new big houses, because there was a statistic a couple of days ago that a quarter of young adults still live with their parents. And it is presumed these young adults will have cars. So that's why it's not just 2-car families, it's 3-car families, 4-car families, 5-car families. So if you build a house with enough bedrooms for 5 people, you may very well get 5 cars on the local roads as well. And there's things beyond this as well. Of course, you get the destruction of the beautiful countryside, England's green and pleasant land and all that. But there's something even deeper, even more sinister about this, is that in the 1980s, the UK produced about 80% of the food that this country needed. Of course, you import and export things. We don't grow pineapples, for example. We export a lot of things like beef. We import things like pineapples and bananas, which we can't grow. That's just trade. That's great. But to have a deficit of the calories you require to feed your population is extremely dangerous. We are down to around 50% and falling fast because they are building these huge developments all over prime farmland.
Very interesting you bring that up, because I can't see how this is sustainable.
Absolutely
even though they
not.
call it sustainable development. It's almost like they're rushing these plans through very, very quickly, but there's nothing at the back of it. I mean, we can see what's happened in London. We've covered the regeneration plans here. But what they're doing is they're creating a massive underclass. And what's going to happen to these people? Because if we're talking about people moving out of London, then how are they going to earn a living? I mean, some of us are in a position where we could buy cheaper properties, say, in places that haven't quite been developed, but that's all going to fill up as well.
Oh, yes, it's a wave going out of London. And the root cause of it all, in my opinion, is our property ownership laws, and that we allow non-humans, shell companies in tax havens, to own property, to own substantial amounts of property. And therefore, the UK property market, because we're a relatively stable country, we don't have hurricanes, we don't have earthquakes. Your investment in bricks and mortar or shiny tower blocks is relatively safe. We have a fairly docile population as well compared to other parts of the world. So the world's super wealthy are seeing the British property market as a way to park their money in something physical. And a lot of these properties at the luxury end don't even have tenants.
That's right. I was looking at some statistics last night, and there's been a 40% increase in empty homes in Kensington and Chelsea in the last couple of years. So basically, cities are becoming these safety deposit boxes.
Yeah, absolutely.
With these flats. You know, I own a flat in London. I've got one in Paris, and we've got a few of it. Now, the thing is that how is the economy going to survive? This is something that don't seem to have factored in, because what we're seeing now is a decrease in wages and an increase in house prices.
Absolutely.
An overinflated market, which is totally ridiculous. I mean, if you go to some of these outer London suburbs, you get a 2 up, 2 down that's going for nearly £1 million. It's beyond a joke. And within 15 or 20 years, if you can go back, these places were quite affordable, and not many people wanted to live in them. People that do them up, you know, you can buy a house in Tottenham for £60,000 or something like that, do it up, and live in it, and it's not really beyond your means. But now, I can't understand how this works. Have you got any idea? Because I'm trying to work this out economically, and I'm not really coming up with very satisfactory answers. You know,
it's all to do with the parking of money. Very few people can afford to buy this sort of London property, and and property within, say, a 50-mile radius of London now without a mortgage. They want to keep people paying a mortgage until they die.
Yes.
So if you're paying a mortgage, if your property is mortgaged, if there's no prospect of you ever owning it,
That's right.
then you're just a renter.
Yeah.
It's just you're calling it a different name, and you've got a little bit more freedom about how you decorate and what you do with the garden. That's it.
Well, this
You're
is
a renter.
it. And also the property laws. I mean, people used to say to me, "Oh, you can't go wrong with property." Well, you can. You can go very wrong with property. And what we're seeing is people's property rights being taken away.
Yeah.
And I've covered this quite extensively, and we're going to be covering some stories that have happened in the past couple of years that have now gone into the High Court. But a lot of people haven't got this kind of tenacity that these people have got. But the reason I bring this up is that what we're finding is that because home ownership is being reduced, and what we're seeing is an increase in what is called part ownership. Now, part ownership means the council are heavily involved in your day-to-day lives,
Yes.
and that's what all of these new high-density flats are about.
Yes.
So you've got an eye scanner, you've got your gym, you've got your mini Tesco, but if you become unpopular with the council,
Yeah.
then it's very easy for them to get you out. Previously, it wasn't, and there's also councils have been given a lot of extra rights through the housing and planning bill
Yes.
that came through, and a lot of people aren't aware of this. They actually still think that they still have property rights, and we're going to talk a bit more about this in the second half. But just for summing up this part of the show, what do you think about all that, Martin? I mean, was this a consideration on you leaving Bedfordshire?
Yes, I'm moving out to West Wales, basically because I was furious. My wife and I were furious about not being told when we bought the house that our lovely view. I know it's classic NIMBYism, but we chose the house we were moving into because we liked the view. We liked a nice place to walk our dogs and all the things that go with living in a little village. And to find that the little village is suddenly becoming a medium-sized town, and nobody told us about it, is a little bit riling. And since we found that two other people in the same place had also moved in without knowing about the development, the Bedfordshire Council was being extremely cagey about this.
Well, this is something I want to get into in the second part of the show as well, in that local councils now seem to be run by outsiders. What I
Yes.
mean by that is people are brought in on very high salaries from interim posts, and you find this with a lot with planning. So
Yes.
what they're doing is they're bringing in people, and especially what I call change agents, who are in there to implement these policies. And you've got these local councillors who've been there for 20 years or so.
Yes.
And there does seem to be some kind of they're getting some kind of benefit from this. We don't know what it is, but they're going along with it without questioning it. So
Yeah.
this is something we're going to get into in part two. We're going to take a
Yes.
short break. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Windows on the World. We're talking about what's happening outside London now. We've covered the regeneration, the re-engineering of London. And before the break, we're talking about property ownership. Things like the Housing and Planning Act and the Infrastructure Bill have been very important in this. And also what's happening in local councils. Why are local councils implementing a lot of this stuff? And we know that the planning rules have been relaxed a lot, but there doesn't seem to be any consultation going on, and there doesn't seem to be any remedy locally. So I'm talking to Martin Houston about this. So Martin, welcome back.
Hi.
Yeah, we were just talking about really what can we do about it? Is there anything we can do about it with rights seemingly being taken away from locals? They don't seem to have any recourse with their local council. What's your experience of this?
This is all called having a local plan, except the joke is that you have to have the local plan the government agrees with, or else they'll impose it on you anyway.
Yeah.
So you don't have any. It's akin to choosing the paint colour in your cell. Do you want trees here or trees there, or a water feature here or a water feature there? You can't actually object to the fact that the place you're living is doubling in size. That our national asset of our agricultural land is being paved over. There's enormous amount of money to be made in this, of course. In that agricultural land is, I don't know what it is per acre. It seems it's obviously a fee amount of money which justifies what you get from the crops. It can't really be more than that, or farmers just wouldn't be able to buy and sell it. But once you have planning permission, an acre in central London, what will that be? Billion, 2 billion?
Yeah.
It's the amount of money to be made by redesignating green belt and agricultural land as built on land is absolutely enormous, and then this is going on all over the place. The worst example I found is that once we found it was happening to us, we started looking and we found it's happening all over the place. Tamworth in the Midlands, Chelmsford in Essex. They're building an entire new town down by Plymouth, I believe, as well, something that UK Column covered. The worst example I found was Chelmsford got one of the leading agricultural colleges, Writtle Agricultural Colleges, and there was an article in their local paper. They were selling off some of their land for housing development. You thought an agricultural college would have more sense.
Well, it's who's in charge, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's what we were talking about, really, is who's making these decisions.
Yeah.
Now, what I noticed locally was that the decision-making process was completely taken away. That's where I lived in London. There was no decision-making process. You've just kind of averted to that quite a lot there with what you were saying. But what we were finding was that people were brought in, and that's what I wanted to get into, really, that people are brought in from outside the area. Did you find this in your local area?
I just found that the local people around me seem to be very fatalistic about it, because this has been sort of in the offing for about 10 years that they were threatening to do this, and it's finally started now. But the neighbouring town of Baldock, they have had a bit of a spirited opposition. They've got a pressure group to stop development. I don't know if they're getting any more success with that. Myself, I tried everything, writing to the council, writing to the developers, pointing out the fact that it's of the sheer folly of just keep building on our farmland, and where will it end? What is the point at which you stop?
Yeah, I think it's very important that people realise that this is countrywide, because people tend to get into local issues and they go, oh, they shouldn't be doing it here, but they're doing it everywhere.
Yes.
And so this is part of a much bigger plan, which I think is Agenda 21, which is the global action plan implemented locally. What we were talking about as well in the first half, which I'd like to expand upon now, is really how this can work financially, because if we've got massive immigration to this country, and they're economic migrants.
Yes.
We're told mostly that these people are economic migrants.
Yes.
So how can they afford, or why would they want to be
they
buying
wouldn't,
property here?
They wouldn't buy property here. These companies, the ones that don't want their properties left empty, would get very good rents off them, mostly paid by the taxpayer if they're on very low wages. This is the big situation, and of course all this building houses, especially luxury houses, has a fake idea of economic activity, which attracts people to this country. Oh, Britain's booming, they're building. They're building because the world's elite are parking their money here.
That's right.
And they want something physical to park their money in. And that's the only reason. We have no real industries left.
No, it's booming for property developers.
It's booming for property developers. And once they've done it, what you have is an island full of houses.
Yes, exactly.
And nothing else.
Yeah.
So we already have situations. We have over in Ireland, there's whole housing estates that were built during their boom that are empty. In China, there's whole cities that haven't been occupied, that are just built because of a speculative boom, and they're just sitting empty. So what's the situation going to be? We're creating a fake idea that Britain has economic prosperity through this building. So what happens when it's finished?
Or what happens when it starts, because
Yes.
I haven't really seen that much sign of it. I mean, what they seem to be doing as well is destroying self-employment. They're destroying small businesses whilst bringing big corporates
Oh,
in.
yes.
And that is the plan for London. The regeneration plan for London is basically Costa Coffee, a mini Tesco and a gym.
Yeah.
And another, say there's an All Bar One or whatever, the local pubs, small pubs are going. This is happening in the countryside as well. And I think when we started to see this about 15 years ago, when you'd get small country places that were more expensive than London. Now, obviously, they have to make their money. But I saw, like you go and visit small country villages, and it's like London prices at the bar and things like this. This is where it all started to escalate, I think, because it didn't used to be like that. And building has never been cheaper. So there's something really badly wrong with this economic model, but it's badly wrong for the people on the receiving end, which is us, but not obviously, like we're saying, for the developers or the people who are just stacking their money in there. So now we were talking about property ownership and property rights. Is this something that concerns you or you've looked into?
Yes, I think the root of this whole problem is the fact we have very, very lax laws on property ownership, in that companies, shell companies in tax havens can own physical property, and they do to a very large extent. This is you don't know who actually owns property, so you have situations where property is sitting empty because it's just treated as a way to park money.
Yeah.
And to mess with our property market just as a physical piggy bank is just so wrong, and we need to do something about it. Most of the world, you have rules about you have to have, for example, so many of your grandparents must be indigenous to that country for you to own property in that country. I believe that's the case in India. There was something mentioned in passing during Theresa May's visit. She's visiting India at the moment. So lots of countries have that sort of rule to make sure that physical human beings related to that country are the only ones that are allowed to own property there.
Yeah, this is a really good point, because even if you go to places like Spain, you have to be incredibly careful, because the local authorities there have power just to take property whenever they want, basically. I mean, you'd have to really look at your own situation with a good lawyer and make sure you had a Spanish partner, basically. So really, yeah, we're inviting all these offshore investors into the country. So it's almost like the centre of London, or the outer London, with what they're creating now, is going to be a bit like Dubai, with all it's kind of empty high-rise places that are owned by very rich people, and you've just got a completely corporate structure in there. So as a self-employed person, so is there any disadvantage for you moving out and away from London and basically a satellite place of London? Do you think you'll be okay? This is what I'm trying to get to, is that many people move out of London and they find that it's incredibly difficult to make a living.
Yeah, which is why London justifies the prices, and how the bubble moves out from London.
As far as the immigration aspect of this goes, this is what they're fighting on a lot of the time, isn't it? They're really saying that basically you're a racist, you're a xenophobe.
Yes, it's bad. It's like,
you can't have the debate. Really, they're not allowing the debate in the mainstream media.
Yeah, typical political correctness. And that the good analogy is the lifeboat. That a lifeboat saves lives, except if too many people get in it, and then you're all dead. So we're in a situation where we're only growing about half the food we need in this country at the moment.
Yeah, we talked about that in the first
Yes,
part.
if we just allow this development, driven by the desires of people to park their money, to draw more and more and more people into this country, then you are at the absolute mercy whoever controls the ports, whoever controls the will to sell food to us from other countries, at what price, getting it to us. So you make the excuse, oil's just quadrupled in price, so everything in the shops goes up. Sorry, you start.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's stated, I don't know where they get these figures from, but London really could run out of food in 24 hours, obviously, easily, because it's all brought in by road, which is another thing we've covered. I mean, they call this thing the infrastructure bill, but it's not really about infrastructure in that respect. It's just about building loads more places, and councils being able to compulsory purchase more property, and also having very lax planning laws. I mean, they might as well say that there's no planning laws now, really. For what they're getting away with, because what I've seen implemented in some areas of London would have taken years previously.
Yeah, it just seems like the Wild West now as far as building stuff goes. It's because money talks, and the corruption there is absolutely enormous. And while everyone's making money out of it, they just turn a blind eye.
Well, it's not everyone making money out of it,
there's lots of people involved in building these houses. It creates lots of jobs while it's happening. But you're not going to get back that agricultural land. You're not going to get back the ability to grow food once it's all concreted over. Once we've concreted over our country, there's no going back.
And also, where you're going to find the people who are going to afford to live in these houses.
Yes.
Because what most people are doing is they're moving out to find something that's really old and run down, or in the middle of nowhere, or in a place where nobody really wants to live, like these places where you could get houses very, very cheaply. But the reason you get houses very, very cheaply there is because no one can earn a living.
Yeah.
So we're back to square one again.
I know. It's totally destabilising our whole economy, because we have this situation. The root cause of the situation is the fact we allow people to own property. Yeah. We allow non-people to own property. Yeah. We allow faceless companies, shell companies, companies without you don't even know who the shareholders are, to own property.
Yeah. Britain's become a corporate safety deposit box.
Yes, absolutely. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Is there anything we can do about it apart from try and find a place in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing people can do on the personal thing. To try and regenerate some of these communities. Go in there and spread the money about a bit. And try and regenerate them.
That's a really good point, actually, because when they talk about regeneration, they're basically talking about something completely different. Not really talking about regeneration. They talk about knocking everything down and rebuilding everything 2 or 3 times more expensive. That's what regeneration means in London. But yes, to actually go into these places and encourage local businesses and make the places self-sustaining again, which they could be. I mean, we did have villages in this country that were able to run themselves previously. We still have to a certain extent, but this is all being destroyed. Well, it's an ongoing problem, and it's a problem which is affecting you. So what we need to do is start thinking about it, and also thinking about who is actually in charge of us. Trying to make these local authorities accountable is probably the biggest obstacle we're ever going to face. So that's it from Windows on the World. We'll see you very soon.